Greetings. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. So I look over to Mark and say, so where would you like it? And he looks at me and giggles and says, Bay 12, please. Right. And so I turn and I trip over the crate and fall and kill Spunkmeyer. Now,
so many reshoots. I'm telling you, that's what
they. Welcome to Speak Nerd and Enter. Kelly, Mark.
You.
Since last we met, Rich, you already finished it, but since last we met, you guys finished the book, right?
Yes.
Okay, I wanted to get you.
What book specifically are we discussing?
Emperor's Legion. Yes.
By Chris Wraight.
I wanted to get a kind of your overview of it now that you've finished it. What do you think?
Who first?
Whichever one of you like.
All right, I'll go first because forget Kelly. So I had actually read that a long time ago. And so go reading it again fresh. But all I remember from a long time ago was like some of the high points. You know what I'm saying? Like I specifically remembered in the end about the paragraphs where they were talking about those big stones that they'd taken from Cadia, the black stones, and reworked them and they were, using them in that way. So I was like, oh yeah, I do remember that. But the second comment, but I hardly remembered any of it, but I get to a point like that where I'm like, oh, I vaguely remember that part. Yeah. But going in like fresh, basically, because I remembered some of the high points, I thoroughly enjoyed it. So we had 3 points of view, right? So we had the Custode and the Sister of Silence, and he wasn't a High Lord of Terra. He was like a high management paper pusher, right? He was a High Lord of Paper, and it was really cool jumping between the different ones and how they tied them all together in the end. So I thoroughly enjoyed that because, there wasn't one that I didn't like, you know what I mean? So they'd go to the sister and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And then they'd go to the, high paper pusher. And a lot of times you'd think, I don't want to hear about this, but it was actually really interesting. All the scenes that he was in, chapters, whatever you want to call it. So like, I thought it did a really good job. I listened to the audiobook version, and again, the narrators were excellent. The production value on that was really, really good because I've listened to a few audiobooks, not Games Workshop ones, but just audiobooks in general that you can tell it was like some guy in his basement with a microphone and they're terrible. And it can really take away from the experience. This one was kind of top notch, like the production value on that, and the voice actors were great. So yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed it, and there were some things I kind of wish I had a little more information on, or more about like how this happened or whatever. But it was also kind of cool because that's in other books. When Gilliman shows up and everybody's like, "Oh my gosh!" So they had that scene where he kind of landed and whatnot, and so he wasn't in the book a lot, but he's in other books. So no, I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I also, one thing I noticed about these 40K books, a lot of novels take place over a compressed period of time, right? It's like, oh no, it happens in this 48 hours, or it happens over the course of this week or this day or whatever. This one actually took place over months and months and months, and probably even years, from the very beginning to the very end. And it's the thing I kind of like about it, builds the scale of the 40K universe. This isn't something that just happened, in a weekend. And it's like, wow, what an adventure. It took a certain amount of time. And when you think about the forces involved and traveling and moving armies and that kind of thing, and that was one of the things that actually played a key point in the book, is this small group of renegades could move so much faster than the ponderous might of the Imperium. It would take them a long time to be able to move sufficient troops to, do what needed doing in the end, etc. So that's my take.
Did it remind you a little bit of the way the book was laid out? I thought this was what made it particularly interesting for me, looking back on it too, in my second read and all that. It reminded me a bit of Game of Thrones, how that's done, where you go from this specific chapter is about Theon, and then you go to the next chapter and it's about Jaime or whatever it is, told from their particular point of view, and I dug that. And I really liked the fact they were using 3 different voice actors for this. That was great. I wish they did more of that. I know they, trying to keep costs down and all that stuff, but man, don't you wish they had people doing the female voices who were female, and that instead of
Right.
always having someone talk at a little deeper voice when it's a woman trying to do the dudes, or the guy trying to talk like this when it's
Yeah.
a woman. Yeah, I kind of dug the fact that they had the three different, and because he was a remembrancer, it was kind of cool learning that towards the end, and this is like him doing his interviews and his
Yeah.
own
Oh, that was
personal.
the thing I did notice. Like a lot of the descriptions of what's going on, like the Sister of Silence is like, and then I did this, and then I did that, and then I burned this guy. But then it tense changes throughout the book occasionally, depending where sometimes it's past tense, like we did this, versus I'm doing this right now, or I said this to a person, and it was subtle, but it was well done, which kind of tied it up at the end, where this whole thing is going back to you, Rich. It could be that unreliable narrator. And there were things where, the guy's like, oh, like, at the time we didn't know what these things were. We didn't know what their plan was. We were just acting, and then come to find out some things afterwards. And so like all of that, I think was very, very well handled. So yeah, 2 thumbs up. It was better than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to sound terrible, and I don't want it to sound terrible, but it's better than you expect from a game company.
Yeah,
you know what
no,
I mean?
it's
Like
true.
Games Workshop, and like you don't think of them putting out, masterfully scripted and plotted, narration, and this was that.
It's
Yeah,
not a BattleTech novel.
yeah, and
Right,
It
exactly.
was cool, and it was
Yeah.
cool getting the. I like the fact that the narration wasn't always about, or didn't end up being always about that character. When it got to the culmination of the battle, it was actually their observations of the other ones. And I thought that was really cool. Now,
Yeah.
Kelly.
Welcome to the K-Man's critical review of everything you enjoy.
We should let him go first.
No, I liked most of the book. I think my favorite character was the Sister of Silence. I like that whole backstory of how they were abandoned by the Empire, the Imperium, and then they're then they're brought back in, and I like that she had this sort of conflict with that whole thing. I like that sort of setting. I grew to like the Chancellor character. Having him be the start of the book was it was a very slow process for me to warm up to that. The Custodes character, I liked the story. I disliked the narrator intensely.
Valerian.
And that's the other thing. I could not keep track of all the different Custode characters that they named
I have
in the book.
I have notes actually to help me keep my conversation straight. Alea Soren is the Sister of Silence, I believe.
Alea is, yes.
Yeah.
Reference your notes.
Yeah, I had to.
No, I mean, I didn't like his narration. The more and more I listened to the voice actor, the more I started to determine that this would be like the Mike Tyson of Custodes, where he is big, he is huge demigod, but he's got like this higher pitched voice than what you would expect him to have. I didn't care for it.
Valerian.
He
fails though. He fails in the very beginning, trying to enter the chamber.
I know, and I found that just annoying. I was like,
well, we'll get to that in a second. What do you think, Kelly?
No, I mean, most of the storyline I followed along. I thought it was pretty good. I like digging into, the forces of chaos coming into assault Terra, in at least feigning an assault on Terra while they got the bigger targets out here. I thought all of it was really intricately put together, and I agree with Mark that it's good to get a story that spans a long period of time rather than just the quick 24, 48-hour thing. I was disappointed by one part stood out to me as a disappointment, and that's the end. When the Chancellor's recounting at the tail end of the book, that it was actually the Custodes and the sister that survived that final battle. I would have liked it better if those two characters had died. I really would have in that grander sacrifice of things. I think it would have hit a little bit more solidly for me. I think compared to the Master of Mankind, I think the Master of Mankind was a better novel. And I would say that. The one thing that did stand out, and I alluded to this last time we were discussing, that it caused me to go back and rethink some thoughts I had at the tail end of Master of Mankind, and particularly that discussion between the Emperor and Diocletian at the end, where the Emperor is saying, mankind's going to lose now, and Diocletian protested. I revisited that quite a bit in my head. I think there's more depth in that conversation, bounced against this novel of, trying to understand how this immortal being saw what was happening and how Diocletian, who was not the emperor, would see what the emperor was saying. Diocletian didn't want to accept certain realities. The emperor was seeing certain realities play out. And then you see that in the book. I mean, the sort of the degrading of the Imperium from whenever the emperor was in charge before he was entombed on the golden throne, and to see that it's, even after Rabute comes back, I mean, there's this sudden power play. Oh my God, one of the Primarchs is back. How do we stop the Primarch from doing this thing? And to see just how humanity fights against itself rather than facing the actual threat. And it's interesting to see that, as I thought about it, labeling chaos as really chaos was really sort of a misnomer. Chaos has one purpose. They know why they exist. They know what they're going to go do. Mankind is the one who exists in chaos because it's trying vainly to just aggrandize itself.
It's an enemy of itself. That's the point I brought up earlier. It's its own worst enemy. The biggest enemy to humanity in the Imperium is humanity.
Yeah,
they screw themselves at every opportunity.
100%. So I think it's a well-written book. My complaint about the narrator, I mean, that's just personal preference. That is what it is. I think it is a good follow-on to the Master of Mankind. I mean, you do make that large jump in time to go from, okay, here's the Emperor tooling about, to here we are with humanity, and to just see how far humanity has fallen.
Yeah, see, I didn't have an issue with the dude who was narrating Valerian at all. I liked his voice actually for Valerian. I thought his was actually pretty good for that. Yeah, especially the character, because you had so many different voices. You think about Diocletian and Ra and all of them that you've had in the books and such, and I kind of dug that. And her description of his voice, that when he started talking to her, it was like, a martyr meant for, addressing the masses, and such a soothing voice and all of that, and how it, she immediately found it annoying. That's why when you said that you liked the sister the best, the Sister of Silence, Kelly, as you were preparing to read the book, I thought to myself, that's going to be his favorite character, is her. Yeah. And I could see that. I liked her a lot. I liked her character a lot, and I thought hers was a great kind of a foil for the Custodes, and that in spite of herself, she couldn't help but liking him, and she hated the fact that she did, because she found him so annoying and all of that. The Chancellor, you start out in the book at first, it's all political and all that stuff, and you're kind of feeling like, okay, that's great, don't care, that kind of thing. But that's not the point. The point is his start versus where it finishes. Kind of like you were talking about with the Emperor. And that's why I thought this would be a good second book to read, is because exactly of what you were talking about. When you see his vision, like you said, at the end of Master of Mankind, that's exactly what we were talking about last time, where he's looking forward and seeing all those strands, and he sees so many of those strands now being dominated by the very hurdles he was trying to shepherd, people past, and just knowing it's fruitless. It's not going to happen. They're going to do it. They're going to do their thing. And everything I've worked towards on this is pretty much done. And then there's Diocletian saying, no, that can't be. And he's like, really? Okay. What are you going to do with your, your spear and your loyalty and all that? What you doing, Diocletian?
What do you know? I think
but see, that's kind of the question that I have about. Go ahead, Rich.
No, it's like it's funny because the beauty of all of these novels is that you see things in slices of perspective over time. So the Emperor is around about 60,000 years old. ancient by anyone's estimation of a human
Almost
life.
anyone's.
Yeah, almost anyone. Yes, almost anyone. We'll get to that. But I mean, his lifespan spans epochs of human development.
Exactly.
Yeah. Our current age, what we're in right now, right, which would be the I don't even know what they would call it, the prehistory of the dark age of technology. And then you got guys like Diocletian, who they're ancient by human standards. They live, they're practically immortal, so somewhat.
Mhm.
But they're merely reflections of the emperor's, because they're works of his. They're his work. They're his artistry, right? So whereas the Legiones Astartes are his weapons, the Adeptus Custodes are his artistry. They're everything he would pour into something that he would want to make. The Legiones Astartes are tools that he uses to fulfill a task.
You know, the thing about the Custodes, though, because I was thinking about that and what you were talking about with that.
Mhm.
The thing I think makes them special is the fact that the reason I would say, as you know, if I were part of the creative team, the reason he made the Custodes was not because he was making them in his image, but rather he knew from, having that foresight, these particular individuals were going to be stalwart enough for what he needed to have done to make them Custodes. So he changed them biologically, he fortified them, mentally, whatever he did to help, keep them from being assailable and overtaken by, such otherworldly forces and that sort of thing. But the fact that they were who they were is what made them so valuable to him. So he went and moved, heaven and earth to get these particular individuals so that he could make them stronger, longer lived, and able to do what he needed to have done, because he saw these people are going to be hurdles. These ones are going to be exceptional in being my bulwark against those hurdles. Just like the Astartes. The Astartes, you got a bunch of them being mass produced. I'm sure he can't see all of the futures of all of them. So he made the Custodes, so when they get out of hand, he can set his personal boys loose on them to get rid of them. That's kind of how I saw it, was that these particular individuals were special enough that it made them valuable just on who they were, and
I think he made the Custodes because he wanted friends. I mean, that's just an aspect of his humanity. At his root, no matter how far developed the emperor is beyond normal humanity, he wanted some connection back to people, that he didn't want to be alone. So he made the Custodes to be both his personal guard, but there were his confidants. There were the people that knew him the best.
See, I would buy that, except for the fact that never worked for me. So,
well, you're not the emperor. Although you might think so.
Now, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's, or at least you think about it and you think, yeah, there must be a part of him that wants that connection. But I wonder if he ever was allowed to have that. That's the thing, because when he was, from the moment he was first born, he's got this foresight and he's just grown and grown and grown with the power and the ability that he has. You got to become more Manhattan-esque and more isolated that way, to where, what kind of friendship is it? Because you know what they're going to say, you know what's going to happen, you know what's going to be coming next, that kind of thing. It kind of changes relationships to something that I think we can't really understand, and makes the character difficult to tackle from that perspective of creativity. So you kind of make it very nebulous that way. You may be right, I don't know, but it's an interesting thing to think about with a being like that. What kind of relationship would they actually have?
But with all of that foresight, he makes some very strategic screw ups in that foresight. I mean, you would think that he would have saw the downfall of mankind.
He's not omniscient. He's omnipresent. He's not omniscient.
Yeah, he told you why.
Everything, but he doesn't know what he's looking at.
Yeah, he told you in Master Mankind why. He did the whole hill thing with, and said, go get a grip and climb the mountain, and then laughed at him when he slipped. Said, see, your dumbass can't do any better. And that's kind of how he is. But I think Chaos is the same way. I think Chaos Gods are the same way. They just don't have to worry about the same issues that he does. Because Chaos has essentially forever, or as long as they can keep getting fed with whatever emotion they happen to be nibbling on at the time, so they can just sit back and sow chaos essentially and see what happens. They don't have to worry about it in the same way he does, because the Chaos Gods do make reflections of themselves, little splinter versions of themselves that they can control and reabsorb and all that so much more easily than he does. So
yeah, it's funny because this is going off into other territory with the Belisarius Call, where we see kind of a revelation of another being that's beyond even the Emperor's viewpoint. So
well, don't say anything with that one, because that's actually the next one I want him to
good.
to
Yeah,
read.
I'm glad, because that one I think kind of locks a lot of keys into a lot of locks.
Well, that was the thing I liked about this book, where they had, the High Lords are going to have this vote, and so they're all showing up, and the Master of the Mechanicus it took like 8 heavy lifters just to bring him there, because he's body. It's like his little head in this mountain of machinery and whatnot. Like, that was some evocative imagery. And again, I give props to the author of the last couple of books that we've read. It's one thing to say he was really big and his head was stuck in this big machine and they brought him over there, but he didn't craft his word. Like he took really good care in how things were crafted, and it was almost poetic in areas. Right. But I enjoyed that, because, it's one thing to say, he shot the guy in the chest with his laser rifle. And or whatever whatever action or he's describing. Like, they've gone out of their way to and again, as professional writers, that's kind of their job, but I'm saying they're doing a good job of it. Across the board. Occasionally I'll come across, some turn of phrase in these books. I'm like, wow, that was well done. And I've noticed that in the last couple of books. So these, like I say, again, if your expectations are not that high, like you're going into, okay, it's a science fiction book from a game company, it'll be fine. It'll be serviceable. And a lot of them are. That's what they are. They don't rise above that. These two have risen above, kind of workman-like prose to, these guys are good.
Yeah.
That's why I have such high hopes for the film series.
Well, that's
that kind of crafting.
See, that's the thing I want to get into. Well, first of all, Kelly, would you give it a overall thumbs up or down?
I give it a thumbs up. I think out of a personal K-Man rating,
that's it.
I give it 3.5.
There we go.
K-Man. 3.5 out of
5.
3.75 K-Mans, or how many? What's the
3.5 out of 5?
No, 3.5 out of 3.5.
Up there.
Yeah. That's kind of it, Rich.
3.5.
Yeah.
So you're making it too easy for him. I want him to commit one way or the other.
Up or down, buddy.
I'm not comfortable with the positive aspect of this. I'd like to. But
I actually think the next book in the series is actually better than this one, honestly.
I hope so.
What is the next book in this?
Well, series? That's Shadow of Regent, or Regent Shadow, whatever it was. Yeah.
Shadow, you got it.
Same author and all that. However, in this next one, I'm going to say, in this next one that we're talking about, Belisarius Call, the great work.
Great work.
Mark, you remind me of Belisarius Call.
Okay.
You can do anything.
If you're going to have an RPG character that just screams Mark to me, that's Belisarius Call. And
after I read the book, I will decide whether to be offended by that or flattered.
You won't be offended by it. He's an asshole, but he gets everything done.
It's like I'm looking in a mirror.
I'd be interested, I'd be interested to see if you guys feel the same. So anyway,
that's good. It's good, actually.
I'm rereading that currently. So if you guys are able to do that, that'd be great. But yet, that dovetails into this next part, which is I was watching a video today from another dude. I think it was Chapter Master Valrak. I think it was his channel, and he put out one about who should or what should be the first story they do and all this. And you remember we were talking about that? And
People are standing for the Inquisitors. They're like, oh,
he had the two on there that
I'm still gonna go with my forbidden love story between that Escher Ganger and that
Orlok.
that Orlok. I'm telling you, right? It's a tale as old as time.
Well, that would be about as.
I mean,
don't
picture
wanna
them. Picture them emerging from the darkness of this dank underhive, snapping their fingers,
Yeah.
ready to brawl.
So but
Yeah,
before you get
the
started,
Jets
Sean,
and the Sharks.
Uh-huh.
I have to say that I've been observing this on social media in the conversation groups, the chat groups and stuff, that people are like the fans. There's some proportion of fans that are standing. They're just like, oh, we want Caiaphas Cain. Oh, we want this Inquisitor. Oh, we want that.
Yeah.
And I clap back to them. I'm like, you guys are talking like you want to do this like someone who understands everything that you understand. That's way too small. You can't take someone who has never observed this before and say, well, here's an Inquisitor and the Inquisitorium, and here's the Adeptus Sororitas, and you're just going to lose everyone in the plot. You need to start big and then draw in. You can't start that small. I don't know what their issue is, but they're just obsessed with Henry Cavill is this Inquisitor. I was like, God damn, man, you need to stop.
Yeah, he can only play one role. You know, you can't have Henry Cavill run around playing 5 different characters. You need to approach it like the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
Right. If you're going to tell the story, whatever that story is, like I don't want, and I've said this before, like I don't want Henry Cavill to be, this guy in this movie, and that's all we ever get. I do want Gaunt's Ghost, and I do want some Necromunda stuff, and I do want some Inquisitors, and I do want various Space Marine chapters, and I do want Xenos and Orcs and all of that. And there's plenty of room for all of that in the same way that Marvel has given us the Avengers and the Guardians of the Galaxy and this bad guy and that bad guy and Ant-Man and there's room in the shows and She-Hulk and Daredevil and all kinds of stuff. Like there's room for all of that if they're
there's no room for She-Hulk.
There's no room for She-Hulk.
All wrong.
She-Hulk was a good time as long as you weren't expecting anything good.
As I said before, it has to start at the time the egg is fertilized from which the emperor grows and gets birthed into the world, and you do it as look who's talking. Okay, and just have an emperor baby and his voice.
I like where you're going.
The voiceover.
Tell that to the
3 shaman and a baby.
John, what were you about to get into? Go ahead.
So that was the thing, is that look, I don't want to be rude to anyone, so I'm going to be very careful.
I find that difficult to believe.
Well, I'll be rude to you guys. I don't want to be, I don't want to be rude to anybody because they're all fans and they all have their, it's their passion, and that. But when they start talking about the artistic direction that someone should go in a venture like this, I find it intriguing how weirdly they attach themselves to an idea of what the public should want or would want or something like that. And so I've heard a lot about the first things should be Caiaphas Cain, or the first thing should be Gaunt's Ghosts, or he was specifically saying Gaunt's Ghosts and Eisenhorn, and talking about those, because you have to give the human element, because Space Marines are too boring, too bland, right? And all this. Now, Primarchs and Space Marines are too boring and too bland. Now, he's a fan of the Imperial Fists. So, Rogel Dorn, probably so. But even Rogel Dorn. You guys have read a few of the books now. Do you find the characters in here first to be narrowly written, where it's strictly from the viewpoint of just the Space Marines or just this character? Or do you find that the books that we've read to be far more expansive and to be much more like a Lord of the Rings type thing, or Game of Thrones, or where it's actually from various perspectives?
Right, well, that's kind of what I said earlier about kind of this book report is you're not expecting much when you're like, okay, I'm going to read a book put out in support of this game world by a game company, and you're kind of like, okay, your expectation is at this level. And then when it is exceeded, you're like, wow, that was really good. If this wasn't about Space Marines and Custodes, and this was just some generic science fiction other type of world, like the prose and the plotting and the like, you know, like they've done such a good job. Like it exceeded my expectations from that standpoint. But I can understand maybe why people set their expectations a bit lower, because Black Library's put a lot of stuff out, and not all of it is amazing, and some of it is formulaic and is very, you know, we've had this running joke about the ruinous ichor, and you can only do battle scenes so differently, you know, in writing about them and whatnot, whether it's Imperial Guard or Space Marines or whatever. But you know, again, I think they're bringing their A game. And again, I don't want to micromanage who's doing the thing. If the Games Workshop or Hollywood came to me and said, Mark, we want you to write the, you know, the 40K movie, the first thing we're going to do, or the show, I'm like, cool, I have ideas and I'll do it. They're not coming to me. They're coming to somebody, and I don't know who that somebody is.
They might, because of this podcast.
Yeah, they might be. Hollywood, hit me up. But see, here's the thing, like,
hey, you know, we laugh, but we have been part of the creative process.
Yeah, that's true.
So
now, but again, Andor done very, very well. I think everybody likes, you know, on this podcast at least, we all love Andor. Okay, Book of Boba Fett, not so well handled, right? You know, like, oh, okay, so
Scooters.
They could go the same route, right? They could handle it well, and we'd all be fans, or they can hand it to somebody who's like, I want to subvert some expectations. We're going to make shoulder pads small. and or whatever. I'm going to completely change Space Marines, and now we're going to have female Space Marines because equality or something, and we're going to throw the lore out the window and totally change it, and I think that would significantly not go well in their favor. It'd be disastrous if somebody was just like, I want to change all the things.
Yeah.
You know, but it's too early in the process to know who's running and who's writing and whoever. So like, I'm not going to waste my time and effort and mental energy. I'm like, oh man, I hope they do this, you know, this character, or they do this story, or the whatever. It's too early. Like, we've literally had an announcement, and making movies and media and things like that is such a process, right? If I'm writing a novel, it's literally me and my little keyboard. Maybe I hand it to an editor or a couple of readers, but you know, the creative process is on one person's shoulders predominantly. Yeah. If you're going to make, let's call it a movie, right? You're going to do a 40K movie, and if you're doing the Horus Heresy, it's going to be multiple movies. You can't cram the Horus Heresy into a 2-hour movie, but whatever. You're going to make the first Warhammer movie. Yeah, Kelly would do it.
Kelly would do it all hand drawn, stick.
All hand drawn. It's all like a remembrancer flipping pages.
Emperor with one of those hand drawn little swords. It's like sitting there hacking at Horus.
Let's use logical thought here.
No, there's no time for that.
I'm going to ask all three of you. You're all Games Workshop veterans. You've all been involved with this genre, you know, more than an average person for a long time. What is the thing that Games Workshop sells the most of?
Toy soldiers.
Yeah, but what particular toy soldiers? What particular toy soldiers? What's their bread and butter?
Space
passion,
Marines.
love,
Warhammer Fantasy,
passion, love, hate. Warg.
Care for the fans.
Mark already set it up. Workshop.
Little puppies.
Yeah, Games Workshop at their base, besides all of your tomfoolery, they sell space.
You got to admit, it's fun to throw stuff out. Everything but what the person wants, and you know they want. They're looking for.
It is. But
and to be clear, it is Tom Bombadil foolery.
Tom Bombadil foolery and Goldberry. But we're talking to an audience who may not actually understand the stuff that we understand. What they sell is Space Marines. Space Marines are their bread and butter. It is the root of their business. And now they are entering into the biggest audience in the history of audience.
Yeah.
The audience that they're going into is never going to be bigger than it is right now. They're going to get all those eyeballs on their stuff. Are they going to go with Caiaphas Cain or some other Inquisitor? Or are they going to go with a dude in blue armor with a bolter blasting the hell out of aliens who are going to destroy the human race?
See, that's the thing.
Don't do the Ultramarines.
You got to
do the Ultramarines.
Whatever, but you know, Ultramarines are the basic, right? You know, that's the bread and butter.
You go big, man. That's what you
lead
do.
with
Star
Legion
Wars,
of the Damned.
I still say
Wars
Horus
was
Heresy is the way to go.
Star Wars was the I guess the icebreaker or the pioneer for this sort of thing, where it started big. You know, you saw the main bad guy like in the first few minutes of the movie, comes in, makes his statement. You got the big ship and all that stuff. Then
In
you
Act
show
2,
the
we blow up the
worthless
planet.
little farm boy who's complaining about everything, and
Yeah,
you're sitting there asking yourself as a 7-year-old, well, where's the really cool dude who was there? Bring him back. I don't want to see this guy.
So let's say Hollywood calls me up and they're like, Mark, we want you to plan out, you know, the first couple things that we're gonna do. If I was going to do the Horus Heresy, I would want it to be a Game of Thrones style ongoing series.
Yeah,
It's too big for 1, 2, 3 movies, right?
Yeah.
It's so big. I think you do that as an ongoing series, HBO style. And so that is going to be Horus Heresy.
with perhaps a culmination in a movie.
Maybe. First movie, I could absolutely see the reason people say Gaunt's Ghost, and the reason people say that is because from a production standpoint, it's accessible. You understand what humans are. You understand, like, oh, it's science fiction humans doing a thing. And so, like, if you were going to do that, I would let's use Gaunt's Ghost as an example. That'd be cool. So you got the Gaunt's Ghost, you got their origin where their planets gets you know, flamed by chaos, and you're following the first and only, and you're like, this is cool, and you're showing them do all this cool stuff, and then at the end you bring in the Space Marines and you show how much more powerful a Space Marine is than these cool guys you've been following around for, you know, 3 acts of a movie, and you're like, man, these guys are cool. And then to show some Space Marines show up and just level who they're fighting in the same way that Marvel showed the Hulk to be this big badass, and then Thanos is just like, no, let him have his fun, and Thanos just mops the floor with him. That was how they introduced how strong Thanos was, because prior to that, the Hulk was one of the strongest things, you know, they had. They're like, he punched that flying thing and he destroyed Manhattan, and, you know, we have a Hulk. Like, we don't need an army, we have a Hulk. And everybody's like, yeah, this guy is so awesome. And so using a lesser combat force, I'm going to use that term, to introduce the Space Marines, I can see that as a valid tactic for like your first movie or something, as opposed to all Space Marines all the time. Because
let me ask you,
how do you go up from there?
You don't need to. You're already there. John Wick is John Wick in every movie. You don't meet Super John Wick. You have John Wick in every movie doing cool stuff because everybody.
I don't know. We had John Wick before the puppy got killed.
Well, there was that
John Wick after the puppy got killed.
You know, that
John Wick before the puppy got killed rolled up into the curb, dropped out of that car, all busted up, and everybody was like, "Wow, what happened?" Then they showed his wife die. Then they showed the puppy die, and everybody was like, "Well, whatever he did to kill all those people and get all bloody, I'm on board for it. Show me how he
deserved it. I'm with
you."
Right. And again,
now,
I'm not advocating that Games Workshop do what I just said. What I'm saying is, if that's what they chose, that's a thing you could do to set up how amazing the Space Marines are.
But look at it this way, though.
No, I don't want to look at it.
How many movies have you seen with space military?
4.
Right? You got Dune, you got Aliens, you got
Starship
Troopers, and all of them. You've seen it. You've seen those. It's all the same thing. And it's just essentially the U.S. military in space fighting, you know, whatever they're fighting.
With some cool technology.
Sometimes no. I mean, Dune probably had the weirdest, you know, with the sound thing and all that, but everybody else is just them mini 14s, you know, that are all dressed up and crap like that, or British Sterlings and that kind of thing. Man, I don't think it would make the splash that seeing a movie that had all of them in there, or different factions in there in little bits and pieces, and not just the Marines. I mean, that's what bugged me so much, was saying, you know, well, a movie about a Space Marine is just gonna be bland. Dude, none of these stories that we've read have been about one faction. It's about the entirety of the setting, right? So you have all these different ones. Man, sororities are awesome. Yeah. The Sisters of Silence are awesome. You got the Inquisition, which is awesome. You got the Jacaro, which are probably the most awesome.
And again, the thing about the Imperial Guard is not that the Imperial Guard is awesome. it's the sheer volume of Imperial Guard. You know what I mean? Like there's so
Yeah.
many of them. So there's absolutely ways you can show that, okay, what 100 Marines can do, it would take you 50,000 of these Space Marine or of the Imperial Guard to pull off.
Yeah, I just
Did
think, man, you do the
you like
splash
Chris Wraight?
up front, show people something they haven't seen before on screen, right? And
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you said, Mark, you make a great point. You have an option now to do something for this IP that couldn't have been done before. You could not have had the small screen to big screen integration and all of that that you can have now. Man, it opens up all kinds of avenues. So you don't have to do one thing. You can
Right.
have 3 different things coming out at once. And if somebody likes Imperial Guard, I don't know why you would, but let's say someone does, you have a TV show about that, TV show about, you know, the sisters over here, or, you know, whatever you want. You got
Right.
all these different ones you can do. And then you have the
Yeah, hook 'em
tie-in
in.
Marvel
Hook
style
'em.
to the big, you know, the big
Right.
Avengers event kind of thing that you have at the end.
Mhm.
Hook 'em
And
with Marines, and then they everything else up.
yeah, yeah, you got an option to do something here that you haven't seen before in any of these. None of them. Even all the people who say, oh, everything's influenced by Dune and all that crap.
No.
Dune doesn't have Primarchs. Dune does
Mhm.
not have the Emperor. I know they had their own weird snail slug Emperor and all that stuff. They don't have the Emperor of Mankind. It's a different thing, right?
They don't even have Space Marines.
They don't. Plus the demons,
They got
plus, you know, the
Stargate.
chaos and all of that, plus all the alien races, all this fleshed out stuff that you have here that you can, I mean, you can go to town on it. You got stuff there that no one's seen before.
It's been compacted for
Why?
years.
Yeah, why think so small with your initial splash? Throw something out there they haven't seen before, draw some eyes on it. People don't need to know what it's about. If you
Blow
get
their
them
mind.
interested in the visual, in the initial story, that initial, you know,
Right.
shock.
Well, again, it's also different nowadays coming out with a thing than it was 20, 30, 40 years
Right.
ago.
Yeah.
Like you didn't, if I want to know about, you know, a Marvel character that's coming out in this next show that I don't know anything about, cool, I'm going to go look up all of the things. I have access to all the comics, all the wiki pages, all the history. It's so easy to get informed about a character or a property nowadays that you're absolutely right. We don't need to explain it. You know, in the last couple Spider-Man movies, in the Marvel Spider-Man, they've never shown his origin. Right? They didn't have to. Everybody
Right.
knows his origin, and if you didn't,
Right.
go watch one of the other movies. Right?
Yeah.
We don't need that level of detail, and I'm glad that they've gotten to the point where it's like, yep, here's Spider-Man. We don't need to worry about Uncle Ben.
Right. And you don't need to give explanations for new characters or anything. People are just on board with, just like life. I don't need, like when I first met Rich, I didn't need to say, oh, wait. I need to figure out who this guy is before I talk to him. I need like 30 different people to tell me all about him and his backstory and all that. I just meet the person and we move on from there.
I don't know.
And
Might have saved us a
learned-
lot of trouble had we
It
gone to
might
that
have
level.
in
of-
retrospect,
So,
but
let me ask you something. Let me ask you all something. How many properties since 1987 have done like there were a lot of things that came out in the 80s, this being one of them. How many have created this global phenomenon that this thing has? It's
At least 12.
unprecedented what it's
7.
done. No, none of them. Marvel existed since the late 50s, early 60s. DC, you know, did the Silver Age in the 50s. But this is a child of the 80s, and this has grown into what's now going to be a giant multimedia juggernaut. Honestly,
yeah.
it's going to be huge. Nothing
Right.
else.
If I
has
had to
come
find
with
a contemporary, it would be Star Wars.
Star Wars, but Star Wars started in the 70s.
Star Wars would be,
77.
as a matter of fact,
I
I would say Star Wars is like the other side of the coin. You got the light side, or, you know, the happy cathartic
friendly.
side of
Yeah,
Star
very friendly.
Wars on this side. And then on this side, you have
Kid shows.
gritty, grim, dark, you know, 40K where nothing ends happy kind of thing, you know?
I mean, as soon as I saw this thing back in the 80s, in 87, I saw it. I'm like, I've never seen anything like this. Like,
Right.
This is something else. Like,
And that was with
blew my
the,
mind.
and that was with the, I'm going to use a kind of a derogatory term for it, the primitive, you know,
Yeah.
style and art and efforts and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
that
Rogue
that we
Trader was a
had.
bit of a hot mess. Like it was
It
an
was.
amazing hot mess, but it was a bit of a hot mess.
But it had the atmosphere, you know,
Yep.
and that atmosphere is what got the hooks in there. And I don't know why. It's just because it was messy, man, and there was a grittiness to it that was really cool.
Mean. It was mean.
Yeah.
It was mean.
That dude who, remember the Marine in there who looked like the German terrorist dude out of Die Hard with the ponytail, remember?
Yeah.
You know, and you know, there was just, I don't know, there was enough stuff in there to overcome the right guard speeder and make it cool, you know.
You don't have to overcome the right guard speeder. That thing was amazing.
And the Legion of the Damned, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, man, that would be awesome.
The studded shoulders. Now, going into 2023, they're throwing back to what they were doing in 1987, and it's killing. It's killing. You know, for guys like us, for new people, everyone is it.
But it's so much better than it was in 1980, whatever. You know what I mean? Like the newer, the new sculpts and the designs. It's itching that nostalgic itch. But they're doing it in such a better way that you know, like I want to get into 30K just so I can relive that Space Marine army I had back in 1987. So
it's good. It's good. Yeah. There's a lot of good stuff. My pile of shame is full of 30K, and it's pretty good, man. I like it.
Yeah, I'm eager to see what you think about that next bookmark, that Belisarius Call. I think you'll enjoy that one a lot. And man, I'm telling you, if we're like open, pick your character that you want to play in 40K and all that, this would be the one I would say, yep, this is what Mark would be. Mark would be this dude in just about everything that he did. So it'd be interesting to see if you feel the same, you know.
I think you'll really enjoy that book. It's well written. The character is right up your alley. Like Sean says, he is right up your alley. He's so full of himself. He loves himself so much.
Stop telling him so much about it. Let him discover himself. And I mean that in every sense. Let him discover himself.
Take it inside.
And I'm predicting Kelly will hate Alpha Primus's voice.
Probably. Yeah, probably. It'll annoy him.
So
Kelly? Is Kelly frozen or is Kelly just angry? I think he's frozen.
I think both.
He's pulling a Cartman. He just put up a picture so he could go off and make some snacks.
Yeah. So
all right.
In any case, getting back to what we were talking about with the novel, Sean, what was your favorite part of the novel in terms of like throughout the entire story? What did you like the most out of it?
The thing I liked the best was the battle. Everything from the battle after was the best for me, because it had the most consequence.
The end battle or the battle in the middle? The one on Earth or the one on the moon?
No, the one on Earth.
Okay.
The one afterwards was kind of like a aperitif. It was, it was just for fun, kind of,
Yeah.
But the one that really mattered was the one that was on Earth, and that one had great amount of heroism, danger, all of those things, change, everything, just revelation, all of that stuff happening in this one moment that you can kind of see. Even Chaos can't foresee everything. Chaos is, kind of like the Emperor. They're just throwing crap out there, seeing what sticks. And this was their effort at doing their thing, right? But the changes it has on each of these characters, I thought was really, really well done. And the self-discovery for all these different aspects of being even a Custodes, that everyone thinks they're this one thing, even they thought they were this one thing, and then slowly discovering, no, it's more. Although you could say Valoris did know that. He was the only one who did know that. And, Valerian was just discovering himself as they went along. But the reintegration of them, and I loved the battle with the Bloodthirster and the different viewpoints on it, from his and from hers. And I can tell you, Helena loved that too. I played that for her. And she hadn't heard any of the rest of the book, none of that stuff. She loved that part. She thought that was really cool, that it was exciting and, just really well done. And that's kind of why I say, you put up something big when you do your first efforts, because it'll resonate. You don't need to know much. Even if that was a standalone vignette, that would be an awesome one. If it was
Yeah, it
something
could've
like
been a
on
short
Love,
story.
Death, and Robots or something, you'd be like, oh, that's awesome. I want to see more about that world. So for me, that's what it was. I love the stuff with Gilliman and all of that. All of that was icing on the cake. The cake itself was that part onward, because I think that's where that was the biggest change for the entirety of the Imperium, was from then on. And you can see those who weren't able to cope with that change, like the Administratum,
Mhm. The High
High
Lord.
Lord,
Yeah.
him still trying to do what you would expect humans to do, hang on to their power, hang on to what they're familiar with, and trying to keep things from moving on past them. I thought that was brilliantly done. And yeah, I like that.
Right.
That
And you
part
can
was
see
nice.
that, like, that is human nature. People wanting to hang on to what they have and that kind of thing. So, like, that made sense. I liked that we had Grey Knights in here. But
Yeah.
they were this
Yeah.
very small part of it. It
Mhm.
really made you feel the size of the Imperium, because for most people, like, Grey Knights are like, oh man, these are the specialized tool that is made to fight against, chaos and demons and whatnot. And it's like, yep, there's 5 of them, and they played a smallish role in the overall story. And there were more of them, in the book, that it was like, oh, this man
Yeah.
came, and we had
Yeah.
some here and there or whatever. But it tied together how these, in the tabletop game, your faction is your faction. I'm playing Grey Knights, and off I go. But the real world doesn't really work that way. It's like, so they did that good job of integrating, Grey Knights and Custodes and, the planetary defense people and the Arbites and all kinds of, you can see everything that's going on, and each was playing their role. And I liked it when it was like, okay, it's 5 Grey Knights and 1 Custodes. And then the sisters show up and they're like, whoa, I don't like this, but oh well, I have to,
Yeah.
your psychic hammer ain't working no more, but it's still a big hammer. So, I mean,
Yeah.
like, I enjoyed that aspect. It made the whole universe feel bigger, as opposed to, we're focused on this one faction, or we're focused on this one
And
guy.
I was thinking about this. One of the things that I think 40K actually has in its corner that most others don't have in their corner, at least straight away, man, since the very beginning, they've had the sororitas there. Remember, in the back of the original Rogue Trader, they had the picture of that sororitas there, and everybody's like, oh, wow, cool, female space marine and all that stuff, right? And then we found it's the sororitas. And the sororitas are not, at least to me, they've never been seen as less than or anything like that. As a matter of fact, as far as like strength of will, strength of, passion for belief and faith and all that stuff, they've been at the very top of that from the very beginning, getting the same respect from the Marines and, all of that. I've always thought that if you're going to do a world building effort where you have diversity and I don't know if equality, but whatever you want to call it, right? That was never an issue for this from the very beginning. You know what I mean? It's always been there, and the fans have always been, oh, that's awesome, a sororitas army, man, that's great. They're coming out with new models for that and all this.
Always had choices of everything.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
always
and
menu.
yeah, you're never going to have fans sitting there saying, well, you can't have that because it was, females can't be in, an important part of this, because they've always been there. It's always been an important part of it.
Yeah.
And I think that, and it's always been a natural thing. It's always been there, not shoehorned in, nothing like that. It's always been a natural progression. I thought that was something that I think 40K has to its advantage as well. That'll help appeal to a larger audience. So
the thing that I like the most about this book in particular, and it's something that you mentioned, Sean, the contrasting viewpoints. So you get to see things from the viewpoint of a Custodes. You get to see things from the viewpoint of a what do they call them? Anathema Psychana, the silence. You get to see things from the viewpoint of a politician menial on Earth, on Terra. And you get to see things from the viewpoint of the Space Marines. Like, all those different viewpoints get kind of tossed together, mixed in a salad, and you get to see things from everyone's different view of it. It's like the slices of an onion. Everyone's slice is colored by where they are on the onion. But the whole onion is much more complex, different, and interesting than anyone's particular viewpoint. I really like, and this is something I didn't think about the Custodes. I don't know if it's in this book, but a Space Marine veteran comments on the Custodes like, you're like children. It's like you do all this training, you have all these skills, you have all this ability, you have all this equipment, you do all this stuff in your blood games and stuff like that, but you've never fought in a battle. You're always behind the walls. You don't understand what it's like to go out into the universe and face these threats because you're just here on Terra. And the Custodes who he's talking to is like, he's right. It's like, I've never been anywhere, I've never done anything, and I find that like the viewpoint of a veteran to the viewpoint of someone who's really, really skilled, really, really powerful, and really, really good at what they do, but their viewpoint is very compressed into like, I just do this one thing.
Well, in all fairness, most of them are like that. Navrataran and Valoris have. Well, Valoris has been sending out for some time.
Valoris different, yeah.
Well, no, but I mean, he's been sending out on kind of the down low some custodies to do some special stuff, but by law they weren't allowed to do anything. That was, and so it kind of became part of their nom de rigueur. But at any rate,
but I find that fascinating that as a longtime fan like you guys, I find that fascinating to kind of see that the writer understands that you can dip in at all these different places. You're just not required to tell it from one spot. You can say, like, I'm going to dip in here and see what this guy thinks. I'm going to dip in here and see what this guy thinks. But he's got enough cognizance of how big everything is and how little everyone on a one-to-one basis understands that they're going to, A, find out new stuff, and B, be confused when stuff that they don't understand hits them. Like when the Witch Seeker, when Alea finds out, finds the skin map, right? She was blown away by that. She's like, I've never seen anything like that. And as us, we're like, oh yeah, that's a chaos thing. That they do that. But for her, she's never seen anything like that before. She takes it back to her temple, and their temple gets smoked. It's like, well, yeah, that's sort of on the writers. On Chris Wraight's, to his credit, he really does have a good grasp of how the universe kind of functions as a whole. And I find that, when you get writers like him, Aaron Dembski Bowden, a few others, they really do understand those interconnections between the viewpoints. Like they just keep drawing back and back and back and back and back, and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And as a reader, you read it and it's like, God, man, this is awesome. The story's not grounded in one spot.
I will say, I'm eager to see what you think, Mark, of Belisarius Call. And we have the final books in the Horus Heresy to look forward to. That's starting in January. Yeah, where they're coming out with the first one of those. And I'm looking forward to that. And I'm really looking forward to what they do with the Indomitus Crusade and all of that stuff. So
I want to read the Angron book, the new Angron book, where they talk about how Angron comes back.
Yeah.
I actually want to see that because he's one of my favorites. I like Angron. So.
I know you like him. I know.
I'm fond of it. He's a tragic character. No one understands how tragic he is. He got screwed.
No, they all understand it. We get it.
Just don't care.
He's tragic. Yeah, we got it. All right, boys. All right, boys. Well, thank you very much, and I will see you next time.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye.
This concludes our Speak Nerd and Enter broadcast.